And welcome to Front Row the Podcast. We're very excited to have you here. But before we get going, please remember to like, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review if you got value from this week's episode. We can't wait to share with you all the industry peers, all the industry experts, all around professional speaking. And we are super excited to welcome you to this week's episodes. Get your notepad ready, get your action steps lined up, and let's tune in to this week's episode.
I introduce myself. This is the part where I'm spontaneous and introduce myself. Right, Elliot?
You go, Bruce. You go, Bruce.
Listen,
you kick off the podcast. Over to you, Bruce.
I've been hosting radio shows for 21 years. I'm not used to questions, all right? My name is Bruce Whitfield, and I have been a broadcaster all my career and got into professional speaking about 10 years ago because I got fed up of going to conferences and looking up on the stage and going, that doesn't look so hard, and little did I know. And, you know, doing lots of MC work and doing lots of facilitation work and interviewing people on stages and realizing that the vast amount of experience that I developed over decades of interviewing some of the brightest minds on Earth and Charlize Theron, with whom I spent my 25th wedding anniversary, but we can speak about that. So I kind of figured there's something I can add here because I do see the world differently to the vast numbers of people I see on conference stages who bemoan the present, fear the future, and sit constantly navel-gazing and telling us how awful things might be. And I went, hold on a second. I can do this differently. So I wrote some books. I started thinking more deeply about the news agenda. I started thinking about the way in which I did my own radio show. And I flipped my own radio show on its head, not ignoring the risk, the danger, the fear, the scare, the reality with which people live, but also beginning to say, hold on a second, but the world is surely not as catastrophically awful as we think it is. And that has been the basis of a book called The Upside of Down, Finding Opportunity Where Things Are Uncertain and Difficult. It is the basis then of a second book called Genius, How to Take Smart Ideas Global. And then the dear Dr. Michael Mosley died 18 months ago, and he, of course, was famous for his one thing. And in his honor, and just because it was a good title, I didn't call it just one thing. I called it The One Thing. And
I see. I like what you did there.
100 leaders, and I said if you were in charge of the country for just half an hour and you could change the future, what would it be? And then just recently come from the Singapore FinTech Festival, launching It's About Time, which is a bank startup which is big in Africa and is also in the Philippines and about to go in a big way to Indonesia. They've got 20 million customers and a forecast they'll have 60 million within 3 years. So finding
That's pretty cool.
It is very cool. Finding opportunity where others see risk, chaos, and danger is what I love doing.
I love that. And what a different way to start the podcast. Normally I open the podcast, but I love the way you opened it. And this is it. We do one take. We've done one recording. And you know what? I love it. So welcome to everybody listening. Welcome to the Front Row Podcast. I'm Elliot Kay, the host, the CEO of the Speaker Awards, the Speaker Summit, and a company called Pro Speakers, which is where Bruce and I met. I love that you've given your intro. I can't wait to deep dive into that. This is the Winners Series where I get to interview the winners of the Speaker Awards, both 2025 and 2024. And I can't quite, there we go. I can't quite interview 2026 yet because it hasn't happened yet. But that is happening in July in London. I'm very excited about that. So for someone that's clearly very established.
I've booked. Yes, in anticipation of attending and learning, because the daytime, of the awards. Was the best daytime speaker session I've ever been to, and I've been to several.
Wow!
And the evening was fun, and there was wine, and then there was prize,
what more do you want? Charlie wasn't there, but you know, we'll work on that, Bruce. We'll work on getting her to the Speaker Awards, one step at a time, baby steps. So tell me a little bit, as you started to talk about there. So you've done the day. We're not going to talk about the day today. Tell us about your journey to the Speaker Awards. You won an award. You've just shown the award. So you won an award. For those who do or do not know, you won an award please tell the world.
As a thought leader. Apparently I'm a thought leader. And I'm a thought leader because you said I'm a thought leader.
Well, I didn't say, the judges said, in fairness.
Okay. Here we go. But the judges are deeply discerning individuals, clearly, and identified out of, I think, a final list of about 11, if I remember correctly, and said Bruce Whitfield, and I was deeply shocked and delighted and pleased. How did I find out about the speaker? Was probably because I arrived in the United Kingdom on a full-time basis about 30 months ago.
Oh, right. So you're fresh to the UK.
Fresh
that I didn't know.
You see, I'm an international man of mystery. And
you are you a spy?
Don't say that. Not in these times.
Okay. You can't tell me anyway, can you?
if I did, I would have to do terrible things.
Oh no!
So yes, arrived in the UK full-time 30 months ago, and continued to do my radio show remotely, which was year 21, and realized that I wasn't going to make any progress in the speaking environment if I was constantly distracted by the day-to-day nature of broadcasting. As much as I loved it and thought it was the best job on earth, speaking is actually more fun. Radio was brilliant, served and built up a wonderful audience and built up wonderful experience, and got to speak to lots of different people over many, many years, including Bill Clinton and Charlize and Mohammed Al-Arian, who's still at the forefront of economics, and Nouriel Roubini, the man who claims to have been the only person ever to have forecast the 2008 financial crisis, and Neil Ferguson, and great authors of great books. And one of my favorite lines, if I see an audience needs a little cheering up, I'll name drop 2 or 3 names as I've just done, and then I'll say, the last time I spoke to Richard Branson, he told me how he'd introduced Nelson Mandela to the Dalai Lama, and I told him he was a filthy name dropper. Anyway,
I love that.
And he's just been widowed, and he's a lovely guy, and it's very sad. So yes, I then joined the Professional Speaking Association and went to my first ever meeting, which happened to be a speaker booker day, and I was feeling very bullish and confident and feeling like I can do this.
We can't see that, Bruce. We can't see that about you. You seem really shy and reserved.
No, I know. So shy. And I arrived at this Booker Day, and I was well prepared. I knew what I wanted to do, and there were 8 of us, I think, and I was number 6 or 7. And the tone of the talks before me, and these were 5-minute sessions, were fundamentally different to anything I'd ever seen in any speaker environment. There were stories of deep pain and trauma and very personal stories, and I went, well,
yes,
I've been, other than losing my mother at the age of 9, deeply traumatic.
Oh, no.
Lots of people have lost their mother at 9. It's not a unique story. I need something to do, and I reinvented as I stood in front of these speaker bookers, and I could see them going, yep, I know you've got something. What are you doing? What are you doing? And have you ever been in a car crash?
Touchwood, no, but my stepfather has. So I've seen one.
But, I shall relate this to you because I've had a car crash. Things slow down, and moves. You're going at 60 miles an hour, or whatever the speed of the car crash is. You're going at that speed, but it feels, and you know you've lost control, and you're you're wrestling with the steering wheel, and you're battling to get control. It was a bit like that in front of these speaker bookers, and I'm seeing the lights go out, and I'm seeing the curtains close, and I'm going, come back, come to the light, and they wouldn't. I then wrapped up, and they were very nice. They said, well, clearly you've lost your mojo. Clearly there's something there.
Is that the feedback you got, literally?
Yeah, and but we just can't see where it's going. So good luck, better not next time.
Okay.
And I went, and they were the nicest to me out of a bunch of people. And in that room was a lovely lady. Well, is she lovely? I think she's lovely. Deep down,
she is lovely. If you're going to refer to our ambassador, she is lovely. Yes. You're going to refer to Maria.
She is magnificent. To the magnificent lovely and warm and very direct Maria Franzoni. And
correct.
I'd been listening to her podcast on my drives home for the year before, because in anticipation of coming to the United Kingdom. So I went up to her at the tea break and I went, Maria, I need your help. And she said, yes, you do. So I spent some time with Maria. and then it reformed my thinking and got me thinking it's a new market. I need to be far more globally relevant. All the books I've written, things, the lessons are universal. They're real. They're absolutely pertinent. However, there is a reshaping and a rethinking and a remodeling and a redefining that needs to happen. And I continued with my regular speaking gigs and continued with my regular business and wrote the book It's About Time and did other stuff, while rearranging everything that I do and rethinking what I do and doing lots of deep reading, and then went back to the PSA, to the Booker's Day this year, and the feedback was very different. It was very positive because suddenly things that clicked into place. And that, of course, followed the Speaker Awards. That's where you want me to go. And I think it was probably, I discovered the Speaker Awards via Maria, who would have said, you really should enter these Speaker Awards on her socials. And so I went, well, in for a penny, in for a pound, a lot of video footage from great, really professional quality video, and strung together a narrative which tells part of a story, and entered the thought leadership section of the awards, and was delighted to be shortlisted and overwhelmed to be named Thought Leadership Speaker of the Year. And it was a good thing, really, because I was on holiday with my family in Mallorca and had to leave at 4 o'clock in the morning to arrive in London by 9 o'clock for the day, and then we finished. I meant to go to bed at about 1 o'clock in the morning and was back on a flight to Mallorca at 4 a.m. So it was a wonderful 24-hour period to be acknowledged and recognized in that way, and it was a wonderful affirmation that that's the funny thing. Sorry, as I dominate and take over.
No, please. This is brilliant. A great host shines the guest, right? I think. I just gave myself a compliment there. Anyway, carry on.
You did. No, and I just don't give you a chance because I've been doing
I'm loving
this.
So no, keep going. Bring it.
The best thing that could have happened, was how I lost faith in myself in that room and chose, instead of sticking to what I knew I was proficient at and was capable of delivering, I bottled it and went, shouldn't be myself. I should be more like them, because that's clearly what this market is looking for. And it was the biggest mistake ever and most fortuitous mistake ever, because in doing that, it taught me the biggest speaking lesson in a decade, which was stick to your knitting, trust your content, trust your abilities, stand up, be recognized for who you are.
Right.
Don't try and be anybody else. And it was just such a rookie error. But I'm delighted that it happened, because that forced me to do that whole revisiting thing and engage Maria and think more deeply. And so, hold on a second, what am I really here for? And that is to deeply listen to the audience, to deeply listen to the brief, to deeply act on that brief, and to deliver to that brief as best I possibly can, and to ensure that what the audience gets is what it says on the tin. And that has been the biggest revelation of the last 12 months.
Quite interesting. So if we dial back a bit, a lot of speakers do that, right? They actually, I posted about LinkedIn today about compare to despair, right? So they look around, they go, well, Bruce's book loads, Elliot's book loads, Maria's, I should be like them more. And they go through that fatal mistake of trying to other being, right? And then what happens is, I guess you're fortunate enough that you kind of saw the light, you had that crash, everyone went blank on their face, and it's like a yellow card. Come on, you need to sort this out. And you did. You asked for help, which is great, which I obviously encourage a lot of people to do. But then you were willing to put yourself out there in a different way. Because the awards, there's judges, you are being scrutinized, your work's being looked at by industry peers. And just for anybody listening to this, Maria has no say over the awards. Anyone going, well, he was working Maria, she's the ambassador. None of that comes into play. We are so removed from the actual process. There is a bus between us, if not two. Like, I don't even watch entries until it's done. That's how neutral I want to stay. So tell us, you hear about the awards and you're like, you know what? I'm finding my mojo. I'm finding my feet. I've done this. I mean, you're very established. What was it about sitting there and doing the application that drove you to do it? Was it like a test? I want to pit myself. I want to see how far I go. Let us into your mindset at that moment.
It's okay. I believe I'm ready to aggressively promote myself in the UK, in the Middle East, in Europe, and into the Far East. And I think I'm ready. However, nobody's going to believe I'm ready, least of all me, unless I can prove it. So let me see if the world, the people who understand this industry, and those are people who are professional bookers. They understand what the market wants. They understand what is required to go and stand up on a stage in front of 45, in front of how big is our audience today? 400 people. To go stand up in front of an audience of 400 people, what's scarier is an audience of 5.
Right.
I've delivered to an audience of 1, a chief executive who booked me for his executive committee and then decided to keep his executive committee out the room and said, present to me and me only. And 45 minutes went to 3 hours of deep interrogation. It's one of the most fun 3 hours I've ever had. It was brilliant. Because he was using me as a sort of a sounding board for his own fears and concerns, and was testing my thinking at each phase of the presentation. But it was a really fulfilling time. Yet that ability to know that you are market ready is one thing, to believe you're market ready, to know it is another.
That's internal. Yeah.
The Speaker Awards gave me the external validation that, yep, this is fit for human consumption. You're not going to bake a batch of biscuits and go and, I'm not 100% sure of the ingredients and go and try it on customers. You need to ensure that you will have the biscuits first and then share. And, and if everybody else likes your biscuits, by all means, go out and share them more widely. And the market seems to have related well to my biscuits.
Clearly, and they're clearly very tasty biscuits because you then
crunchy.
Crunchy, and then you show up for the shortlisting, right? So we do a shortlisting party, we make the announcement. Were you in the background or were you ever present? And tell us when you heard your name for the shortlisting moment.
So I was speaking at the time, so I wasn't able to be there.
Oh, right. You weren't even on the call. How rude.
There was an online event, and I have a wonderful woman who's worked with me for a decade, who is based in Portugal. I said, Pippa, just go on the call. Denounce me if you need to. Try not to be embarrassed. And I was on stage. I felt my phone buzz, and she wouldn't have bothered me. So I took an opportunity to take my phone out of my pocket at that point and say, we need to take a selfie in the audience. And I raised up my phone, read the message saying, you're shortlisted. And I went, selfie, and we carried on because I couldn't bear not knowing in that moment. And
can you send us that selfie, please? Can you send us that?
I've cleared up my phone. It's
if you have it, I'd love to see that selfie.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll have a look. I'll have a look.
Okay.
But it was a moment, and it was just like, and suddenly I felt lighter in my shoes, and wrapped up the presentation there. And it was a really big moment, and that sense of changing your avatar on your social media to I've been shortlisted. Was a real moment, and I then posted on my socials, and then,
I remember that. Yeah.
Public response was huge, and there was just this wonderful, of people on socials, and people generally on socials are going to be people who probably like you unless they are deeply disturbed, and there are many of those on social media.
No,
but there was nobody actually negative about it. Just like, it's really cool. That's brilliant. Well done. And then, of course, the interminable. Oh, God, the wait for the day. And of course it doesn't matter. I've been shortlisted. Winning doesn't matter. Of course it matters. Of course it matters. And then on the evening of the awards, sitting, and one of my fellow finalists, and I don't think she'll mind me sharing this, Katja Skipperheen, come up to me earlier in the evening and gone, I've put this through AI, and AI says you, me, and a third person are the top 3. And I said, well, let's see how good AI is. I mean, personally, I don't believe AI, but hey, be my guest. And
It's an indicator, right?
It is an indicator, and it turns out that the top three she was absolutely right on.
Yeah, I remember she communicated with me about all that. Yeah, she's quite very clever lady.
She is very clever and well positioned, and is going to go very, very far. She appears magnificently and is incredibly confident, and is very bright and speaks beautifully. So she's very good at what she does, and. You know, the runners up were announced. I think there were 2 runners up, and as that happened, I went, "Oh, that's a pity." Oh well, good to be shortlisted. And I went back to my wine glass, which was nearly empty, and I emptied it.
Topped yourself
and then
up.
My name was read, and there are photographs of. It looks like looks of horror, but they weren't. There were looks of overwhelm. Going, what just happened? What just happened? And that weird feeling where your mind is racing and your legs aren't quite working, and you're just hoping, please don't let me Jennifer Lawrence onto the stage. Please don't let me Jennifer Lawrence onto the stage. Yes, and then the awards were handed out, and I was then taken backstage and made a video. Where's that video, by the way? Where's that video?
Have you not got it? We'll make sure I get it. We do have them. I will send it to you. If you send me the selfie, I'll send you the video. No, I'm joking. I'll get that to you.
I'm trying to find the selfie. Right.
Yes. And so you're on stage, you got your picture, and you're being whisked off and asked lots of questions, right?
I don't remember a single thing after that. Then Pippa, who works with me, couldn't contain herself and knows better than to ask, because if I'm quiet, usually it means it didn't happen. And she can't help herself, so she asks. I said, don't tell Catherine, who's my wife. Don't tell Catherine. I wanted to arrive in Mallorca the next day going, oh, this whole thing, you mean, oh, this meaningless trinket. Oh, yes. I mean, other than that.
Throw over the shoulder.
Yeah, exactly. Let's smash in the arrivals hall. And, I couldn't help myself. Then on the long train journey back home, I updated my socials with the winner avatar, and she saw that and went, you didn't tell us. Oh, no. My son, actually, no, what happened was, out in Mallorca. And my teenage son, my 16-year-old son, asked me, so what happened? I said, oh, not much. And I tortured him for about 10 minutes while he was in the passenger seat. They were driving from the north of the island down to the middle where we were staying. And I had good fun sort of playing cat and mouse with my 16-year-old son. And eventually went, okay, you can tell Mum I won. And there was silence until later, by the time everybody got home. So there's much family jubilation. It's a big deal. If you're going to put yourself out into public, it takes a lot of guts to do it. And you do. It's wonderful to win. And you do know that often it is you're on a short list, and hopefully that short list reflects the best talent in a category. And then it's a matter of personal preference. It's a matter of who is on point on that day that the judges decide. It's an absolute minefield. It's like any sports game. If the ref blew badly or whatever the case is, you have an antagonism toward the ref. And I don't downplay luck at all. I happened to have a decent entry. It was among the top 3. It happened to be the one that the judges liked best, and I'm very grateful for them for liking it best.
Yeah, and I think this is for anybody listening to the first time or coming across the awards the first time. It is there's 3 judges to each category, and if they know you, they can't judge you, so we have to bring in someone else to judge you. So, and we're very transparent. Everything's on the application process is on there. What you're judged against is on there. We're going to tighten it. We're going to shift it. We've had feedback how to improve it. But, it is a snapshot in time, right? Because we've had people, for example, that for 3 years have been highly commended, like, what do I need to do to win? And there's been people that have entered, like, there's one guy who shared it very openly on social media, Mark, it's like, this is my 4th year. I'm yet to get on the podium. But he really took on board everything. And then this year, he actually, I think, got highly commended finally. I don't know if he won, but highly commended. So it is about taking it and seeing it as an opportunity to grow and learn. Most people go when they don't win, we've had 1 year where people literally came up with conspiracy theories. It was the most frustrating Yeah, it did force us to change things, change some of the rules, how many people can enter categories, how many people can win. That's why if you won Speaker of the Year, you can't then apply the following year. Like, we've changed things. You can only, if you won a category, you can't reapply for that category. So it forced us to change, but it's quite interesting how people can become quite about it. And I get it, because you want to win, right?
No, of course. I mean, my dad was a farmer. And farmed for 60 years and was the president of the Sussex Society, which Sussex cattle from Sussex, and the Petworth estate is at the epicenter of the global Sussex industry. And he would take his cattle off to shows, and he would be anticipating a rosette and a trophy, and some years didn't win any. And I remember him one day despairing, looking at this most beautiful cow and going, but she was such a beautiful cow when she left the farm. The belief that what you have is so good and so wonderful, and yet when you put it next to others, it could be just the ears are different, or the eyelashes are not as longer, whatever it might be. Sometimes the differences can be so minuscule, but that is the difference between being acknowledged and not being acknowledged. And I am so grateful that my eyelashes appealed to the judges.
You were clearly the beautiful choice, Bruce. That's why they chose.
There we go. I was a bull, a big Sussex bull.
You were. And no, it's true, and it is a snapshot, and that's why we make such a big deal about backing yourselves and going through the process, that it's who you become at the end of the process is worthwhile in itself, and the winning's a bonus, and we do work hard, but of course you're dealing with emotions and people like that. And so it's been, and since the award, have you seen a difference in the bookings, have you seen a difference since winning?
Well, certainly, the speaker bureaus have been a little more open to discussions, because I think the Bank of England vaults would be easier to get into. There are more ways into the Bank of England vault than there are into speaker bureaus. By the nature of the speaker industry, it has exploded over the last decade or so, and there has also been a growth in the speaker bureau industry. Yet, as a speaker bureau, and Maria makes this point, and others make the point as well, that the top 1% of speakers on a speaker bureau's list get booked more often than anybody else. Because the speaker bureau is willing to vouch for them. Their reputation is on the line. They want that particular company to come back to them and to ask them for speakers in the future, trust their judgment. And so therefore you have to win the confidence of the bureau. So it has opened the door at bureaus, which is wonderful. There have been a number of inquiries. Some I've not been able to do. Some have fallen at the last hurdle. But we wrapped up the year with a wonderful event with HSBC, which had their national gathering for their professional services customers, and so lawyers and accountants from across the country, and had it in Harry Selfridge's old house, which is Lansdowne House, Lansdowne Club, I beg your pardon. And Selfridge lived there when he opened up Selfridge's in 1909. He lived there for about a decade. I'm not sure he went afterwards, but it was amazing to be in the ballroom at Harry Selfridge's old house, around the corner from his the store, which is still of course there, and being able to speak to this audience, and again taking the reformed knowledge and then getting the fabulous feedback from the general manager of this enormous division within HSBC, saying thank you very much, you made the evening. And you go, okay, we're on. We're good to go. 2026 is loading in a very positive way, because November was the Singapore FinTech Festival to launch the It's About Time book. And that was really interesting as well, going into an environment of 70,000 people at this FinTech Festival, where people speak a completely different language to any other language that exists on Earth. And FinTech spans everything from making insurance and banking work better to digital code that makes money move a fraction of a second faster and gives you an advantage in the world of banking and makes your customers slightly happier. And it's a fascinating world. And as somebody who's covered traditional banking as a journalist for 20 years, it's a really interesting world to be looking into, because they're all crazy in the best possible way in terms of they're shaping the future, of the way in which money moves, and the way in which money is secured, and in the way in which we interact with our money and behave with our money. It's a fascinating environment.
Just before we move on from the awards, if someone's skeptical, and I welcome skepticism, I think it's quite a healthy trait to have. If somebody's skeptical, because we always get, you have to pay an admin fee, and you're not paying to win an award, you're paying for the administration of the award, right? If someone's skeptical, what would you say to them about the process, about going for it?
I think you're right to be skeptical, because you are giving a very personal submission to a group of people who have very personal ideas as to what does and does not work. But these are representatives of an industry that is fiercely competitive, and they will have their own biases and beliefs and their own quirks and foibles and things that they really don't like. And if you do something, if you have a particular tick or use language they don't like, or whatever it might be, that may count against you. That is unfortunately the way of the world. Human nature is what we have to contend with each and every single day. So yes, if you're skeptical, by all means, but you can be skeptical, fine, and you can sit on the sidelines and say, well, then I won't enter. I'll show you. I won't do it. Ha! Then you'll see. And then somebody else, possibly not as good as you, somebody else whose entry would not have stood up to yours, may win it. And they will have the doors of the bureaus open to them, and they will be spoken about, and they will be sung and shouted at from rooftops, albeit briefly. And people will go, this person was the best entrant. And you'll go, I know I'm better than them. And then it's petty. And I think, so be skeptical by all means, but don't be cynical.
Yeah.
Cynicism doesn't help anybody. Give the best entry you possibly can. Do it long before the deadline. Allow it to be scrutinized. Allow it to be, send it to friends, send it to people in the industry you like and trust. Even somebody who doesn't think you're wonderful. Allow them to have a go. And try not to second guess your entry too much. But if there is something that 3 people come back to you on and saying, actually, there's an edit there that doesn't do you any favors, change the blooming edit. But what was the old, I don't know if it's still the lottery line, but you've got to be in it to win it, was when the lottery was launched here 30 years ago. And
I don't know if that's still it. Yes, I remember it.
But those old payoff lines that are really good are the ones that stand the test of time. And in the same way with the Speaker Awards, if you're not entered, you have, I don't know if you play golf, but 100% of short putts don't go into the hole. So have a go, putt. Putt with meaning and determination, and go for it. Because if you don't, you're just going to sit bitter and twisted and miserable all your life, and that doesn't serve you or anybody else.
Well, hopefully not. I don't think that their whole happiness depends on the awards, but I get the general gist. And look, awards aren't for everyone. I get awards, and awards aren't for everybody, and that's okay. I just want from a skeptic point of view, we welcome it. Do your research. That's why we put everything to the front. You can see what you're marked against. You can see the judges. You can check them out. Just don't ask the judges for feedback while you're in the process, because they'll say no. That's the key thing, and don't ask anyone involved. Go on, Bruce.
So, do you like wine?
Yeah, red wine.
Yeah, okay. But when you buy wine, if a bottle has a medal on it and says, this wine has won this award, are you likely to favour it? You're paying £15 for a bottle of wine. And there's one with a medal on it and one with no medals on it. Which one are you likely to choose?
The one with medals, of course. Yeah. So any award, awardee, of course, it gives it more kudos. I agree. Listen, we're on the same side here. And I think that's a great metaphor, actually. And I might use that in our marketing.
And there are some winemakers, however, who refuse to enter awards because they want the brand equity of their bottle to stand. They believe their brand is bigger than the medals. And so some speakers will say, I don't want to win a runner-up prize. So therefore, I'm not going to enter because I believe my brand equity will be damaged by being the runner-up. I want to be seen as the best. I have this high status. And so therefore, the risk of not winning the top prize is actually quite damaging. And I think some people may feel that way also about awards.
Yeah,
what if I don't win? However, what if you do?
Exactly.
And as the Speaker Awards gains momentum and gains increased credibility and gains increased ubiquity, I believe having those gold stickers on bottles or silver stickers on bottles does help.
Yeah, look, we're hearing so many stories of people that have entered, of people that have runners up or won, and we're now, because we're coming to our 5th year, we're really starting to hear the results. So you telling us that the doors open for bureaus and you're getting bookings. Like we know someone who won last year and the year before. She's doubled her bookings and increased her fee. We know someone else. I'm not going to use names because I'm asked permission to, but we know she's hitting 7 figures and she credits it back to the awards. And I'm like, listen, we're a tiny part of your journey. She's like, no, that's not true. You're a massive part of the journey. Of course, there's people that have done nothing with it, right? I can't pretend that suddenly everything falls into place, but your chances are better if you're in the process. And I think that's really important to say.
A big investment house said, we want our people to think more like thought leaders. Can you come and give us a thought leadership? I said, why have you asked me to come and do 3 hours with you on thought leadership? And they went, well, you won the Thought Leadership Award, didn't you? I said, as a matter of fact, I happen to have done that. And so they said, but you have done training on thought leadership. And I went, yes, of course I've done training. And yes, you want thought leadership? Of course I could do that. But it was also a really interesting exercise because then you truly interrogate the power of thought leadership, what it really means, and in the preparation of that. So now it enhances your own skills and development in that field as well. So it is about thinking, laterally when you win these awards and how you leverage the awards, and it's no good winning the award and then sitting back and going, okay, where's the business?
What do I do with this? Yeah.
You do have to work it. It is a wonderful accolade, and people need to know about it. And the best, and some people feel that there's an ick factor associated with blowing your own trumpet. I'm afraid in the speaking industry, nobody's going to blow it unless it's you.
Yes. I mean, there's blowing your trumpet and there's being arrogant, and I think people confuse that. You see, I think that's when I work with people myself. I'm like, look, you need to be visible, you need to be credible, you need to be the authority. That doesn't mean you have to be arrogant and boastful. I think there's a difference. So absolutely. So really love that. Now I want to dive into Bruce a bit more. Like we've done the awards. Okay. While I have your attention for a bit longer, what is something that you wouldn't normally share that you're happy to share with the people listening about you? It doesn't have to be to do with speaking, by the way. It could be anything you're happy to share, of course.
I'm an open book. It's. I don't have any. Do I have any secrets? I don't have any.
I don't know. Do you? Well, you can't tell us you're a spy. We know that part.
And well, that's obviously that's professional courtesy to my colleagues, But and again, it's. No, I have no secrets. I lived my life as an open book, and I think having been in the public eye for a long time,
yes.
I don't speak publicly much about my family. It's got nothing to do with anybody else. I use socials purely, Twitter or X or whatever it's been called this week. I use that to be sarcastic and cynical. However, in the adult world of LinkedIn and in warm and fuzzy places like Instagram and a little bit of Facebook, it's all views of the world and professional stuff. You won't find pictures of my kids posted by me on the internet.
Same.
It's if they want to do that when they are of a sentient age, then by all means. And my eldest does. He is part of a sporting group that does very well, and so they post lots of pictures of pecs and abs and things, and that's up to them because
me too. My social media studio's full of them, can't you tell?
What other people's pecs and abs.
Yes.
If I had some, I would also show them off. I know they're in there somewhere. It's the only thing of which I'm very protective is family, and
yes,
and there is nothing more to be said on that front.
Yes, so I shan't ask.
You're welcome to ask. I just won't answer.
There we go. No, I'm not going to. So look, I think this is a perfect moment for us to talk about the kitchen table, right? So I don't know about your house, but my household, I have young kids, mine are 5 and 9. And the kitchen table is where everything happens, where they do their art, it's where they cut things, snowflakes, you name it. It's where Emily and I talk about the future, talk about what we want to do, wealth building. It's where I sit often, I strategize. It all happens around the kitchen table. As much as I've tried to move it off the kitchen table because it gets frustrating to clear it, you know, it becomes the hub of creativity and visionary in our household. So, Bruce, what's on your kitchen table?
So this was the kitchen table, and I then got kicked out of the kitchen because I was dominating the kitchen too much, and it made the kitchen an awkward place to be, particularly for conversations like this. And I do many sort of meetings and consultations and presentations online as well. And so if this is the kitchen table, it has got all of the books that I need to read. It's got some of the books that I've written, because I do refer back to them. It has got diaries. It has got notes and sketches. And I've managed this year for the first time to consolidate all of my thinking into a single moleskin, which is, got spidergrams all over it. And it's, this is my... There's 6 talks on my website, of course, but the one that we are talking about most at the moment is the chaos advantage, because what is absolutely clear is that the world has got increasingly uncertain and chaotic over the last 3.5 decades, since something called the World Uncertainty Index was first unveiled. This year in 2025, certainty has gone 3 times higher than it was in the global financial crisis, twice as high as it was in COVID. And this is business uncertainty, it is levels of corporate uncertainty, and it's people trying to understand, it's really hard to plan for 2026 if you're sitting in a large corporation and you're trying to figure out, what the consequence will be of sporadic economic and social policy emerging from the White House. That certainty has evaporated. There's no predictability there anymore. It doesn't help that Vladimir Putin is holding out as Europe scrambles to defend itself with the uncertainty as to whether or not the United States will remain, as it has been for the last 80 years, the last line of defense, if it will have that integrity to maintain that stability. So there is a huge amount of uncertainty in the world, and the rash unpredictability of what is happening in the Western Hemisphere and parts of the Eastern Hemisphere mean that leaders are sitting, and many are quite stuck. And so the chaos advantage is that opportunity to go into companies and say, right, what are you really good at? How do you do this? How could you do it better? How do you de-risk? How do you find new opportunities in a world where everybody, your competitors are having the same conversations as you're having right now? What is going to be your competitive advantage? Where are you going to... And the internet is a wondrous and beautiful thing and a curse at the same time. What it has done has ensured that we all have access to roughly the same information at roughly the same time in any part of the world. And how we choose to respond to that information is the thing that defines us, and is the thing that will set us apart from our rivals. Yes, we all have, we know the risks for 2026. You pick up the last edition of The Economist and it says the world in 2026. And it will say, this is what our experts think of the world in 2026. And you'll go through it and you go, yeah. Okay, they haven't thought about X or Y or Z. I remember Nouriel Roubini wrote a book in 2021 called Mega Threats. What's the one mega threat he missed? Vladimir Putin going into Ukraine. It upended everything. Food prices went up, energy prices went up, cost of living crisis spiked after COVID. We had enough problems with which to deal. So nobody can foretell the future. Nobody can forecast the future. But what you can do is say, this is what we know. how do we choose to respond to it? And that is at the core of what I do, at the heart of what I do.
Okay.
In fact, at the heart.
Right. So the chaos advantage. And of course, we're going to put links and stuff once we actually publish this so people can find out more. So do check it out. I recently interviewed Kay Akentil, and she very much talked about her biggest thing that we should be talking about, that we're not talking about, is how quickly we're going to reach AGI, which is basically when AI becomes fully able to live, sustain. The question will be, can we unplug it? You know, that typical Terminator kind of vibe. And she's like, some saying it's 5-10 years, some people saying we're as close as a year, but no more than 30. And we need to be talking about that because it's increasing our extinction rates by 25%, right? So I was like, oh my gosh, that's rather alarming, right? Yes, of course, it's all up in the air, like you say. So for someone that's looking at the chaos advantage, and anybody listening to you now, what can we do about the chaos advantage to the average person, right? I'm not running a massive multinational corporate. I am small. Go on.
I apply humanity to technology, and I go, right, technology has served humanity absolutely brilliantly for millennia. I don't know what the name was of the first person who rolled something on a log and then decided not to really heavy. Let's
call him Bob.
Or Ug, or Ug, or whatever he was. But it's about 5,000 years ago in ancient Mesopotamia, somebody works out that if you connect two bits of wood with an axle, not that they would have called it that at the time, and you can roll it, you can make a cart and move more things more quickly. Ever since then, technology has served humanity brilliantly. There was huge disruption, of course, Industrial Revolution. The thing that made Britain a global superpower was technology. Whether it was Stephenson and the rocket, whether it was the original pumps that pumped water out of the coal mines to make them slightly less unpleasant and a little bit safer, which led to the emergence of steam technologies and ultimately electrical technologies, then computational technologies, and now we're in the era of intelligence and AI. I look at the doomsayers, and I know as much about this future as they do, except they use a language that makes them sound like their knowledge is superior. If I take it down to a pure baseline human level, I look at, for example, China and China's approach to how it deals with people who get a little bit ahead of themselves. China has been quite tough on business leaders. If you remember Jack Ma, who was at the forefront and became quite outspoken about the Chinese government and its approach to Hong Kong and others, he suddenly disappeared from public view for 18 months and emerged much quieter and calmer than he had been going into it. The founder of Alibaba, of course, one of the world's biggest platforms. And Alibaba remains one of the world's biggest trading platforms, yet it is now a far more muted version of what it was 5 years ago when Jack Ma was feeling very powerful and influential. The Chinese in particular feel very little about ensuring that people don't run away, get ahead of themselves, and also that technologies don't get ahead of themselves. I think probably Xi Jinping's biggest fear right now when it comes to AI is what happens when 1 billion Chinese go home because the machines have taken over. And I don't believe that that is a scenario that he or anybody within his Politburo is willing to countenance. And so therefore I see an element of control and an element of regulation coming into AI, which keeps it as a useful tool for the future. It certainly will eliminate lots of functions and lots of the boring stuff. There was a man called Richard, somebody very famous, who invented the spreadsheet in the 1960s, and he was devastated by this. He didn't want to launch his spreadsheet because his view was that accountants would be put out of business. More accountants in business today than there ever have been, and the spreadsheet remains a remarkable invention and makes running our lives so much better. We can schedule family events, we can run our expenses, we can do our own books and hand it over to an accountant who then knows how to properly apportion our expenses and our income and get us the best possible outcomes, hopefully. yet there are more accountants than ever. I am firmly in the camp that AI remains as a servant, and that our worst fears of AI are probably, as our worst fears of most things most of the time, probably overdone, because human nature is. And the reason you and I exist, and the other 8 billion other important people in the world right now exist, is because our ancestors had this very good nose for danger. So if they were in the cave, they looked left and right to make sure the saber-toothed tiger, the resident saber-toothed tiger, wasn't outside the cave before they went out to go and hunt the woolly mammoth. And when they went to go and hunt the woolly mammoth, they took 19 of their best friends and tried to chase it into a hole rather than, take it on head on. We are averse to danger. We're averse to risk. And one of the reasons why media coverage is so negative, why media coverage can sometimes seem so alarmist, is because it is saying, watch out, this is very scary, very dangerous. We need to control it. We need to be careful of it. And I think that so much of the news cycle is at risk of sometimes becoming a bit of a hype cycle. Yet in the background, there are people far smarter than I don't know about you, but far smarter than I, who are thinking far more deeply and understand this stuff far better than I do. And I do believe that I look at the earlier stages and the massive claims of the purveyors of current levels of AI, and please don't tell the AI I said this, they are overstating their own bloody brilliance. Here's... Sorry, let me just... I told you earlier I was a shameless name dropper. This is Lee Child's first book, which is lovely, by the way. It's the Lee Child, the creator of the Jack Reacher series. And I said to him, so how concerned are you about AI? And he said, well, I suppose if AI could get past the firewalls and read all of the Jack Reacher books so far, it could present a perfectly plausible amalgamation of all of the Jack Reacher books. But what AI can't do is create a new plot for Jack Reacher. And that's we're talking about agentic AI here, and AI thinking for itself. Yeah, good luck with that. I'm not particularly religious, but whatever makes us human and makes us original, and what makes us thinkers and what makes us who we are in the world is not something that can be replicated, I don't believe.
Yeah, I believe that.
If I'm wrong, the machines will come and get me and have me for breakfast, and I won't know. I refuse to be held back by a fear of the future. I said, what do we know? What does it do right now? What are its likely capabilities 5 years from now? Because really, you can't plan it's really hard to plan a year ahead, never mind 5 years ahead. And, does it help you lower your costs? Yes, it does. Embrace it. Does it help you become more efficient, more effective, better at what you do? Absolutely. Embrace it. Use it. It is a tool. And I trust people better than myself to keep it contained.
Okay, brilliant. So, by the way, Kate wasn't doomy, but because I'm going to ask you the same question. I asked, what should we talk about when we're not talking about, so she flagged that. I'm going to ask you the same question. Bruce, what should we be talking about that we're not talking about from your world?
I'm doing a lot of work on trust at the moment, and why trust is broken down, and why it is that, and the data is best out of the United States because they're very good at collecting data, and they've got great academic institutions that think very deeply about this, and they've had the funding that UK universities haven't had. I look around the world and I see the breakdown of trust, and it's understandable as to why that trust has broken down, and social media has exacerbated it. There was a study done by PhD students at London Business School and at Wharton, in which they studied 170 years of media coverage in the United States, 12,000 newspapers, 1 billion news articles, and they came up with many conclusions, but the one that struck home most to me was how much more negative media coverage has become over the years, and they can quantify this negativity bias within media. This be careful, danger, all of the time.
If it bleeds, it leads. That can't be
completely. And I read a wonderful book called Factfulness in 2016, Hans Rosling. a little orange book, and Hans Rosling had basically started presenting facts to the world and saying to people, is this true? Is this true? Is this true? And most of the time, most of us get most very simple answers wrong. For example, let me ask you this question, Elliot.
Go on.
And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but hey,
that's
you're
okay.
Here, and there's
Let's
a spot, and you're on it. How many people in the world live in abject poverty? And as I ask you this question, I want you to think of some of the worst scenes of poverty you've ever seen in your life. I want you to think of slums in.
Well, I've been to
places.
Rwanda, and I've seen that poverty, right? Like huts,
and
no
Rwanda,
windows. Huh?
Yeah. And
right?
Rwanda's growing at 6 and 7% a year. All right. Okay.
Yes. I mean, I know that I'm not there. Yeah.
Yeah. And
so you're going to ask me how many do you... Sorry.
Yeah, how many people live in abject poverty as defined by the World Bank? Abject poverty being less than $2.15 a day. And I'll give you 4 numbers.
Okay. Yes.
I'll give you 400,000, 600,000, a billion, and 1.2 billion people live in abject poverty a day.
What was the second one? Yeah, 600.
A billion. And 1.2 billion. How many people live in abject poverty based on what you've seen on National Geographic and the news and everywhere else?
The skeptic in me would go with 600,000. The second number.
600 million.
Oh, okay, 600 million. Sorry, yeah, 600 million. Yeah. I'll go with that number.
Why?
Because when we're talking about media, right? I'm from the school that
so you've thought about it, you're responding and you've thought about it and you've gone, it's obviously a trick. I'm not going to go for the lowest number. I'm going to go like I do on a wine list in an expensive restaurant. I'm going to go for the second cheapest wine because it's less likely to be awful and it's not too expensive. So you've gone for that option. You happen to be right, and you're one of the very few people out of hundreds of times that I've used this example. There was one example, it was a charity gig, and it was charity workers, the loveliest, warmest people in the world. And as I shared this slide and shared the answer, most people, by the way, had voted for $1 billion. They didn't want to go to the high point, so they went to the second highest point. And they voted $1 billion. And they would have been right in 2010, because then there were about 1 billion people living under $2.15 a day. The world has moved on. China has uplifted many hundreds of millions out of poverty. India, in particular, has lifted many hundreds of millions out of poverty. Some African countries have also done a good job of lifting those people out of abject poverty. I mean, it's half a cup of coffee, for goodness sake, in central London.
So scary to think that, isn't it?
It's terrifying. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's not much money, but again, people hear what they want to hear. Not you applied your mind to it, and this man turned puce. He turned the deepest shade of red I've ever seen a human being going at the back of the room. And at the end of the session, I said, "Any questions?" And he immediately put his hand up.
Yes.
And I said, "Yes, sir." And he went, "You're wrong." Well, yes, probably. But can you define it slightly more than that? I've been married for 30 years. I know I'm wrong. Can you just please be more specific? Anyway, you're wrong. That number is wrong. And I said,
okay.
Why is it wrong? I feel it is wrong. And I went, okay, that's fine, and I'm delighted that you feel it, because you're clearly a very good person. You work with charities. You go from your comfortable home into poverty-stricken areas every day and do your very best to help uplift some of the people who live in some of the most toughest circumstances in the world. They make Dickens look like a happy fairy tale. I mean, if you think of Dickensian London, there are people living in worse conditions than that, and you're trying to uplift them, and obviously you feel that way. But the data shows differently. Well, the data is wrong. So then please show me better data. Point me to a place. I can't do that. I just know it's wrong. I said, okay, look, and we get so emotional about our positions and our beliefs. Rosling was very big on that, and my own sense of the world is, yes, there are very bad things, and the study of newspapers in the United States found this massive decline in positivity and this massive focus on if it bleeds, it leads. It's media's a business. It needs your attention. It needs your eyeballs. It needs your clicks. It needs you to do that so that advertisers come and sell their products to you online or wherever they might be doing it, on the pages of a newspaper for those who still read newspapers. Yet, over the last 170 years, other things have gone on. Other things have happened. Humanity, our lifespans, our quality of life, our health, medicine, science has all improved to a point where humanity, most people in most parts of the world, for most of the time over the last 170 years, with some abominable breakouts of terrible events over the last 170 years, but the vast majority of people have had a much better life than their forefathers have had. Do I believe that our children will have a better life than ours? I think they will have a better life than we have had. Why? Because that's the nature of humanity. Will they live under... I grew up, with the fear of nuclear bombs going off, and eventually grew out of that. But it's that threat hasn't gone away. Will they have trials and tribulations and fears? Yes, they will. Of course, it is the very nature of human existence. However, I'm having a much better life than my dad ever did, and he certainly had a better life than his dad, and he had a much better life than his father before him, and certainly his father before him, and their father before them. And forgive me for being patriarchal here, but that's the way family trees work. But it's that sense of are my sons likely to be better off? Well, if they work hard, yeah, they will be. So buckle down, find a path, and do it. And so, when we see the world in binary terms, it is all evil, it is all bad, it is all good, it's la la land. That's also not true. However, in the chaos and the uncertainty of the world, how do we choose to deal with the information? Where does the opportunity lie if, take COVID as an example. The opportunity came in this technology that we're using at the moment has fundamentally flattened the world. Most people travel a lot less for corporate meetings than they used to have to. Of CEOs who've done massive mergers and corporate deals where the first 100 hours, which would have required them to do 10 international trips going across 8 different time zones, those weren't necessary. And when it came to the nitty-gritty in the last week of negotiations, they went to go meet face-to-face. Do we trust each other enough? Do we like each other enough? How does this work? We've built rapport online, and so they have better quality of life as a result. Things are not ever as good as you wish they would be, but they are very seldom as bad as they could be, because I do think that humanity generally works itself out in the end.
So I guess the question as I hear you speak is, how can we trust better?
How do we trust better? I got up this morning and I got my kids out and they walked to school. It's 500 yards. I hope desperately that the bus drivers who are dropping other kids off at school at the same time are focused on the road, but they're professionals and they're trained. I trust that they will stay on the road, and I trust that my children won't be mucking about and stumble into the road and get themselves crunched. As far as I can tell, they made it to school safely again this morning.
That is always good to hear.
I put them into an environment with other adults that I've not ever met. Yet I like the headmaster very much, and I like the philosophy of the school, and I trust that the headmaster has made good appointments. I then got into a car and I drove down the left-hand side of the road to a venue. My wife dropped off a car for a service, and we drove back together on the opposite side of the road, going in the opposite direction, within a speed limit that is acceptable and generally accepted. We trust implicitly. Every single day we go out and we trust.
That is true.
We go on trains driven by drivers we'll never know their names. We get into planes with pilots who introduce themselves and they sound calm and reassured. So we go,
remember them.
Good person. And you never know if the same pilot has flown you twice. There are some people who will hear a female voice on the intercom, and you see, and it's my favorite hobby, by the way, on planes, is if you hear a female voice from the cockpit, you go, ooh, and you see some people stiffen. Because suddenly ooh, and then they check themselves and calm down and go, they've been through the same training. Oh yes, okay. So how do we build trust? And I don't want to blame Tony Blair for this altogether. But I do think the era of spin undermined political trust. It was an era of landing funky messages, getting them memorable, getting political goals achieved. The era of spin, I think, has done a huge amount of damage. I think in order to have trust, you have to be able to zoom out of the day-to-day noise and the day-to-day clutter, and understand that there will be people who will break your trust, and understand that you don't have to deal with them on a regular basis. There'll be people in the public domain who break your trust. People have very low trust in the NHS at the moment. People have very low trust in the budget process. They have very low trust in a government that most people voted for just over a year ago. And that's because, running places is hard. Political integrity, you come in with the very best intentions, and suddenly you realize you can't do all of the stuff you wanted to do. So you make big promises in the electoral process, and you then look toward the next electoral cycle and you say, well, generally, because when somebody breaches your trust, you go to the next best sounding thing. The lies that were told during the Brexit process that were fundamentally untrue. Most people heard what they wanted to hear rather than paid attention to what needed to be paid attention to. So you were talking about the lady who was saying, what are we not paying attention to? We need to be paying attention to what people are saying, and we need to interrogate what they're saying, because just because we trust, it doesn't mean we have to be stupid.
It's a very good distinction.
And we need to interrogate. So a little bit of cynicism and skepticism goes a long way. And as a journalist I've done, and people don't believe me when I say this, but I have verified it, an average of 8 interviews a day, 220 days a year, over 21 years.
Oh.
I'll do the maths for you. It's more than 50,000 interviews, many of them repeats with the same people over long periods of time. And I have developed a very clear sense over that time of people who I trust. Now, what is trust? Trust means you're not lying. Trust means that you are going to do your very best to put your best face forward. However, when I challenge you on a point of fact, you don't try and lie about it. You may acknowledge the fact that, yes, you omitted to tell me that you have liabilities of Y when I'm looking at a growth rate of X. So having information, challenging people in authority based on that information, and working out who is your best interests at heart. One of the questions I ask audiences, who do you trust implicitly? Who do you trust? And I will throw out names. Do you trust your parents? And most people, trust my parents. Of course they let you down from time to time. Of course they've fibbed to you from time to time. Of course they've told you little white lies. They'd lie to you about the Tooth Fairy and Father Christmas. I'm sorry, children. It's true. There is.
Don't let my kids hear that. They're still in the believe phase. But they won't be listening to this podcast. I don't think they will anyway.
Not yet. One day, though. One day they know that you're part of the conspiracy. But you lie to your children all the time. But you lie to them to create a warm and fuzzy and fanciful world. It is not a malicious lie. People generally will trust their parents unless they've had, and many people have had horrific upbringings and parents that not deserve their trust whatsoever. And you watch people whose parents have developed addictions or have got sad and depressed. And again, you trust them, but you've got to manage that addiction they have, or that you've got to understand that their behavior is not out of malice. So I said, okay, now keep your hands up. Who trusts their spouse implicitly? And a couple of hands will go down. And then you'll say, have you ever been tempted to look at your spouse's WhatsApps or their texts? A couple of hands will go down. Do you trust your children? And, you want to trust your children's intentions, but you keep a blooming tight rein on them as they get bigger because you want to protect them. So it's not that you don't trust them, but you might not trust their behaviors, perhaps. Doesn't mean you don't trust them. but they're
Yeah.
experimenting. They're trying different things. They're learning things. And so what is trust? Trust is you want to believe in the best of human nature, at the same time maintain I was speaking to auditors the other day, saying your professional skepticism is the best tool that you have as a weapon against those who will seek to deceive, because the way incentives are structured in the 21st century is that you want to put the rosiest picture forward, and your job as that auditor is the ultimate interrogator of fact. And so there are publications I trust, and I'm yet to be let down by them. Do journalists make mistakes? Of course they make mistakes.
Surely.
Believe it or not. Yet, there are some publications I would not trust in a million years, because their intentions are not honourable. They're driving a particular agenda. And when I write books, do I act with the highest? I nearly said something I despise, which is, do I act with the highest levels of integrity? No, I don't. I act with integrity, because there's only one kind of integrity, and that is.
That should be the highest, right?
Yeah. There may be 50 shades of grey, but there are no 50 shades of integrity.
You can't be partly integral. Yeah.
No, absolutely. You can't be half pregnant. You can't be half honest. And when you listen to people, and I've built a bullshit detector over the years, where to be completely honest with you. Oh, so when were you not honest? Can you? I'm more interested in that now, actually. So when did you stretch the truth previously? Okay, and why did you do that? So yes, trust is earned.
Yes, of course.
There is nothing more devastating than when you lose trust in somebody, because you will never trust them again. You can forgive them, you can embrace them, you can still be friends. Yes, it's in the public domain. So I'm trying to think of the simplest way of describing this. A massive, Europe's second biggest furniture retailer, at one time was a company called Steinhoff. It was smaller than IKEA, and it had gone on a massive acquisition trail. And it was buying up bed businesses and furniture businesses, and it was magnificent. Half the market trusted this particular retailer, and half the market did not. This particular chief executive, the founder of this, he was the chief executive who had expanded the business and globalized it, went to the CEO of Africa's biggest food retailer and clothing retailer and said, we need to merge our businesses and create this African powerhouse. And this man, in his 80s at the time, agreed and said, this is a terribly good idea, and we should list it on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. Absolutely, we should do that, and was completely compelled. Now, the CEO of this very smart African retailer's food retail business said, there's no way that you are going to merge my business, the business I run, with that man's business. Why not? Because I don't trust him. Why? Because of X, Y, and Z, and gave lots of good reasons as to why not to trust him. The deal was pushed and pushed and pushed, and these two people who had been best of friends since university days and were well into their 60s, 70s, and 80s fell out over this. A book was written about the retail CEO. There's a massive literary festival, and I was interviewing the CEO in front of an audience of 400, and I'd read the book, and I knew his story, and I knew his friend's story, and I knew the story of the man who by then had been discredited, and was recently took his own life as a result of the net closing in on him. He was as crooked as the day is long. And Whitey, the CEO, said to him, so you realized that this guy was a crook? And he said, yes, because I would go into his stores and I would see the layout of the stores. I would see this. I could see how wrong this business was, and what was being reflected in the numbers was not what I saw reflected in the stores. And so I tried to advise my good friend. And so I said, well, are you still friends? He said, yeah, we're still friends. So I said, but do you trust him? And he said, yeah. So that was a bit of a pause. He said, no, I do still trust him. I just double check him more now than I used to. And there was, beforehand, there was an implicit trust. They could act on each other's behalf with absolute clear sense that the values that they held dear were common, that they had common goals, that yes, they would make mistakes. Yes, they would make mistakes. Yet, as he said, I just watch him more closely than ever. I said, that's not trust, is it? He goes, yeah, but maybe I was too trusting. The story, It's About Time, is about a bank which is founded by a lawyer who wants to serve the base of the pyramid around the world. 24% of people around the world can't get access to a bank account because banks can't find a way of banking them because it costs most banks about $75 a year just to maintain a bank
account.
Whereas these guys have got it down to less than $5 based on new technologies, based on the platforms they use, based on the fact that they host their banks within the cloud and Amazon Web Services and other cloud services. So they've got a much lower cost of operation. And so that makes it possible for them to bank people at the base of the pyramid and make a profit and be sustainable. These two guys have known each other since university days and trust each other implicitly. They are two sides of the same coin. And I found a clip while we were writing the book, and I'd gone in and just looking for anything I could use against them in the book. And I found this clip of them standing, and Kun, who is the CEO, is very charismatic and very much he gets teams to do things that they would ordinarily not do, and he pushes people to the very extremes of their capabilities. He sees their talents before they do, and he trusts them to go out and grow the business. And Chart, who is the more silent partner, is the Rails guy. He does the work of building the business and setting the values in place and putting the systems in place. And they check in with each other all the time and challenge each other all the time. And they know that neither is ever going to act not in the best interests of the business and each other, because they're significant shareholders in something that they're building for future generations. And there is a wonderful internal video that I found where Kun, who's far more playful than Chart, is far more earnest, and he goes, "We still trust each other, don't we?" "Yes, we do." He said, "But there's a lot of forgiveness that has to happen." And you can just see Chart seething, because in any relationship that the decisions you make may be mistakes, you may have misstepped. However, if your values are aligned and you trust that the person is never going to act in breach of those values, I think that's when you have trust. It's a long answer to a very short question.
No, it's fascinating to understand, because what you've really also talked about the layers of trust. Now, I know you're going to say trust is trust, but there's trust amongst us, there's trust amongst our family, there's trust amongst the government, there's trust amongst business owners, there's trust amongst business partners. You know, so obviously it gets me to reflect on my relationship with the founders of the Speaker Awards and Speaker Summit, right? Like, our trust in each other. And you're right, there has to be a lot of forgiveness, because even though I trust someone doesn't necessarily mean they've done what I thought or wanted them to do, but it doesn't destroy the trust. Right?
Did you communicate it as clearly as you could have communicated it? And did you compromise? And did you, again, it's the human tapestry is a wonderful thing. Yet
it is.
I do think that trust is only broken when the unspoken agreement between us, which is the values basis, that the values we believe we share, is breached.
Yeah.
And that comes in family, it comes in businesses, it comes in associations, it comes in societies, it comes in everything, where suddenly we thought we were on the same page, but actually we're not. You did X. That is directly in contravention of how I am comfortable dealing. Suddenly you discovered that really I am a secret billionaire, such a secret, as secret a billionaire as I'm a spy. And I discovered who the judges were, and I, gave them each 10,000 quid to make me and one of your co-founders of the awards had agreed to give me the list of who the judges were, and so they were complicit, and they got a backhander from the judges because actually, no harm done. Nobody will ever find out. I mean, that would cause the entire destruction of everything that you hold
of course,
dear.
the whole business will collapse.
Yeah. But also and it would seriously lead you to question your sense of judgment of others. If I look at just some of the greatest business relationships of all time. It built on implicit trust. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. I mean, a couple of years after Jobs died, Wozniak came into my radio studio and we had half an hour together. And I said, everything I see about Jobs makes him distinctly unlikable. Did you like him? And he was very uncomfortable answering the question. It became very clear to him, to me, that there were sides of Steve Jobs' character and personality and his he did some fairly nasty things to many, many people. Yet he was so obsessed and so driven by this vision of delivering a world-changing technology that was the thing they had in common. Wozniak did the coding, Jobs did the vision, Jobs did the driving, Jobs did the managing of people. Wozniak is quite an introvert, but he may not have liked aspects of Jobs, but he trusted him, and he knew that he was the guy he was willing to work with. And because they shared the vision of delivering this thing, they might have had different approaches to it, but they trusted each other implicitly to get the job done. And so sometimes you don't even have to like the people you trust. You just have to bloody know that they're on side.
But get it done. Yeah, that's what you're saying in the sense of when we get on a plane, we implicitly trust the pilot not to crash it. We don't know them. We don't like them. We have no emotional attachment besides the fact that the plane takes off and it lands. And yes, thank God I'm alive. So I think in those scenarios...
Occasionally, I mean, there was that dreadful crash in India recently, and it appears that one of the pilots was, decided to nosedive, to ensure that the plane didn't take off, and one person survived. There was a case of a German pilot. One went to the loo, the other pilot locked the door behind him, and deliberately pointed the plane toward the ground. He wanted to kill himself, so he decided to take 200 people with him.
Every now and then, yeah. Is that enough?
You can't live your life, however, considering that there are millions of flights every year and billion, I forget the details, the numbers of it, but many people fly every single day. Flying remains the safest form of travel. Why? Because the industry has policed itself and regulators have ensured that there are very, very high standards and barriers to entry for the global airline industry. And for the training of people and ensuring that the mental health of people is good. Occasionally people will slip the net. But
that goes everywhere, right?
Yeah, that's not a reason to not trust.
Before we wrap up, I'm intrigued to hear your favourite story that you like to wrap. One of your talks. Choose one of them. I think you have lots of interesting stories. I just want to quickly tap into, the rise of the super influencer. I don't want to give them name. I'm not going to name them. Aren't we running the risk that people's view of the world is now based on opinion and not enough?
One of my favorite things. Thank you. Well done. Your EQ is on fire. If there was a Geiger counter, it would be going into the red. And that is why research and integrity matter. It is why you need to be very careful. James Clear, the Atomic Habits man, says, the information you consume is the soil from which your future thoughts grow. In the same way as if you eat a bacon sandwich for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and you have it with lashings of mayonnaise on white bread and don't have fruit or veg, chances are you'll become obese, become diabetic, and something will kill you sooner than had you had a more balanced diet. In that same way, if you're consistently consuming the dirge of information that comes at you each and every single day, because the internet has made it possible for anybody to have an opinion and to share that opinion. I was reading a piece from the executive editor of the New York Times the other day, who was asked, how do we as journalists stay objective? And it says, well, the job of the journalists is to tell the truth and to convey the truth, and people who choose not to believe you have got the entire internet of conspiracy theories upon which they can rest. Our job is not to affirm their belief of the world. Our job is to deliver an explanation of the world as we see it. And most of the time, the likes of the New York Times and the FT and the Guardian and others, they may not share your worldview. They may take a slant on a story that is true, but it doesn't sit comfortably with you because you hate migrants, you hate politicians, you hate Labour, you hate the Conservatives, you hate the Lib Dems, you hate reform, you hate whatever, but you have deeply passionate feelings about things. It doesn't make your feelings accurate. And unfortunately, information has become very polarized and polarizing.
Yes.
And so you will never find a Guardian reader listening to GB News or watching GB News, as you will never find somebody who is a consumer of GB News reading the Guardian. Somewhere in between, there is a balance. Your own peace of mind rests, and my own peace of mind rests on a single fundamental belief that the world is made up of a delicious tapestry of mad people, of colourful people, of glorious people, of honest people and dishonest people. The vast majority of people in the world, I believe, and this is not, I don't know this because I haven't spoken to everyone, simply want a better future for their kids than they had for themselves. They want to get on, and they'll have different ways of approaching that. But ultimately, the vast majority of people don't want to go to war. The vast majority of people don't want to send their sons into the trenches. They don't want a mushroom cloud to appear on the horizon, and therefore, with these short anomalies that we have, invariably sanity kicks in, somebody's assassinated, somebody dies, and a new era is born. In the depths of the Cold War, and I think you're old enough to have been told stories about the Cold War, Elliot, but it's
what you say? What you say?
But in the depths of the Cold War, in 1985, glasnost was impossible. The fact that the Berlin Wall would disappear within 5 years, the fact that East and West Germany would be united with all of the complexity that has brought, was impossible. And again, the right people in the right places at the right times, doing the right things, acting in the interests of the family, the business, the society, the country, ultimately people nut this stuff out. We agree, we've got different cultures, we've got different values. What do we want? Do we want a prosperous shared future? Yes, we do. Okay, let's
make it happen.
My dad farmed for 60 years. My favourite last story, and then I will let you go.
No, that's okay. No, I love talking to you. I literally can sit with you for hours. Keep going. No, go on.
Other than I spent my 25th wedding anniversary with Charlize Theron. You haven't gone back there, so I'm going.
No, we haven't. But feel free to tell us about that.
Charlize Theron, Oscar winner, most beautiful stars
very
of our
charismatic.
generation. Yep. Very charismatic, and she is done so well in Hollywood, and I was asked during COVID to do an interview with her. So yes, it was my 25th wedding anniversary. I was at home and she was at home, different homes. But the way I like to tell the story is I spent my 25th wedding anniversary with Charlize Theron. My wife was in the room next door and she had a better time than I did.
I just got the image from Friends when Ross is sitting there with a candle, carry on.
Oh, Friends. Again, seminal and multi-generationally interesting. It's still finding an audience today, which a bit like ABBA and a bit like less so the Beatles. But, the stuff that stands the test of time is the stuff that makes us feel good.
Yes.
It's amazing. And so yes, Charlize was very earnest, and I wanted to ask her, like acting questions, and she wanted to talk about producing and directing and be more earnest. And it just didn't gel. But anyway, she was lovely. She was very polite. And when I told her at the end that it was my 25th wedding anniversary, she then melted and was lovely. But she was trying to be very earnest. Anyway, she's not going to see this, and I wish her well.
She might. Who knows?
Oh, no, she's very busy at the moment, apparently. That's what she says. My favourite story is about how cycles return to a norm. My dad, as I mentioned, farmed for 60 years, dryland agriculture, and every year, talk about trust, you plough open clay soil and plant individual seeds in the soil, at the same time apply fertilizer, close up the soil in anticipation that the seeds were good, that they would germinate, that they would break through the crust of the soil, that the rain would come, the plants would grow, that they would then flower and be pollinated, that the grains would swell, and then when the cold came, that the maize in this particular case, or sorghum and potatoes, whatever the crop was, would get to its absolute potential, and he'd be able to harvest it and sell it in the market at a price higher than it had cost him to put it into the ground, and he'd be rewarded for the risk he'd taken. And this worked really, really well. He was a kid who was born in 1928, so his earliest memories were of the Great Depression, also of the most devastating drought in living memory in 1932 and 33, at the same time as John Steinbeck was, reflects in The Grapes of Wrath and other books that he did, the Great Dust Bowl of America. That's an important part of the story. And my dad was farming in 1981, went through this process of planting, and the rain didn't come. The crops barely got out the ground. There was a disastrous crop. 1982, he went through the same process again. By 1983, he had to go and borrow some money, and he went through the same process again. 3 years in a row of drought was crippling him and his neighbors, and my father was sitting under huge duress and huge stress. I remember it very, very well. And he got to year 4, which was then 1984, and he went to the local bank manager and said, I need more money to plant. And the bank manager said, thank goodness. And he said, what do you mean? He said, nobody else is borrowing money. They're waiting for the cycle to return. And so my dad said, well, I believe the cycle's about to return. He said, why? He said, well, I've been studying. I've been reading Grapes of Wrath, and so that's triggered something in my mind. And I've discovered that weather patterns in the Mississippi River Basin are universal. And if the Mississippi River Basin gets good rains the season before, history shows that we get good rains. Exactly. And my dad's neighbors thought he was mad. I mean, he was like Noah building the ark. People are pointing and going, you insane? If we don't plant this year, yes, we go deeper into the hole, but at least we'll hold on to our land until it has rained, and then we can act. And my father said, no, well, I'm relying on data, and I'm going to trust that the rain this year will come. On what basis? On that. That's mad. But in those days, nobody was talking about two weather phenomena. One is El Nino and one is La Nina. We understand these better now, and that makes weather patterns less unpredictable. But nobody was talking about that then. And my dad had spotted something that scientists were working on in the background and had a theory on. And by pure practical application, borrowed the money, put the seed in the ground. The crops came through, they germinated, they pollinated, they grew, and he began the process of building back his farm. His neighbors, who had not planted, looked on with envy.
Of course.
They were like the speakers who didn't enter the Speaker Awards. They were like the...
I like that.
How did you know? And he just said, I trust cycles. I trust nature. I trust things to return. And so at the moment we're going, if you think of just in... And I'm going to use American politics because everybody will relate to it because it's far bigger and more public than any other. But if you think of how America went from Bill Clinton to George W. Bush, and from two terms of George W. Bush, remember the Daily Mirror headline, how could Americans be this stupid, when he was re-elected. It went from George W. Bush
to Obama.
To Barack Obama, and then the extreme from 2 terms of Barack Obama to Donald Trump, and then the extreme of going to Joe Biden, and the extreme of going back to Donald Trump. What is the next extreme? Well, we're seeing it happen in New York with the election of the New York mayor, where Modani, where he has come through, and it's the absolute opposite. Absolute opposite of Trump. So we're seeing these radical shifts left and right, and there's very little move back to the center. And I think the center is out of fashion. However, the center, whenever the center returns, is one that is that calibration that comes eventually. It's deeply disruptive. It's deeply uncomfortable in the moment in which we live. But I think cycles do return, and my father certainly bet the future on it, and I'm willing to bet the future on it too.
Okay, so last question and we'll wrap up. I think what you're saying is it's time for new thinking.
It's absolutely time for new thinking. And it's time for, I call it, the upside of down methodology. Yes, everything is bad. Yes, everything is scary. Yes, everything is frightening. However, not everything all the time is bad and debilitating. If I showed you a graph of the S&P 500 index, which is the graph of the 500 biggest companies in the United States, most of which are invested in different parts of the world, and right now they're dominated by the Magnificent Seven, they call them, with Nvidia, the microchip maker, which is valued at $5 trillion. It's insane.
Wow.
That's got to recalibrate. That's got to calm down a bit. At the same time, these are fabulous. The S&P 500 is a very good barometer of human progress. So in the last 35 years, with wars in the Middle East, with the huge destabilization following the removal of Saddam Hussein, with the emergence of political leaders with whom we may or may not agree, this huge dislocation of trade, the trade wars, the rhetoric,
Collapse.
which is so negative and devastating, and the sorts of narratives that people are accepting as true, it is just draining to the core of your being. However, if you think of, in the last 35 years, what businesses have emerged? So what problem? Most businesses exist to solve a particular problem. The sort of businesses that have emerged in the last 35 years that have made the world move better, move faster, more efficiently, more effectively, have been microchip businesses. The average family car now has 1,000 microchips in it, making it run better and more efficiently than any other car that's ever been built in the past. That makes life better. Battery-operated cars. It's a response to our growing aversion to consumption and fossil fuels. We've got to do the maths on the extraction of the minerals required to make the batteries, and we're going to make the batteries more efficient and better into the future, and we will. At the same time as all of the noise and the clutter of the news cycle is dominating our everyday, if you're living in the daily news cycle, you're never going to lift your head and just go, what else is happening in the world?
Yeah, it's too overwhelming and scary, right?
Yeah. However, you have to look at the medium-term trends. You have to look at the things that are shaping the future. 20 years ago, Jeff Bezos is building a little business called Amazon. Terrible for the high street. All of us love it because it makes life so much easier. Elon Musk, you don't have to like him. You don't have to like his politics. You don't like his intervention. He's got no business talking about Europe. The fact that we give him attention is our fault, not his. He's looking for attention, and we're giving it to him. The fact that he runs a powerful social media network. The fact that he is putting a mesh of satellites around the world to create the most wonderful, accessible, affordable, easy access internet that you can achieve anywhere on the oceans or in the remotest jungles of the world, provided you've got a clearing, is wonderful. But what's his goal? I question why he wants to control. He wants to be the biggest purveyor of internet, because once you control the rails, you control what goes on those rails. So I think that's his long-term game. But at the same time, these are people building great technologies. They are building the future. 20 years ago, they were thinking differently about the world. They're thinking differently about the world today. Our job today is to look at the world as it is, to imagine how it can be, and try to move towards that sort of world, a more centrist, collaborative, trusting, mutually beneficial environment.
Brilliant. I think that's a perfect note to kind of wrap this up on. I agree with you wholeheartedly. So final words of wisdom to anyone listening about the awards, and generally just let's wrap this up with some Bruce wisdom, because you've shared so much. Go for it, and then we'll end this amazing episode. I could talk to you for hours, so let's wrap it up.
I think that's all my material.
That's all you've got.
I have my favorite way, and I end. Do I tell you the ending of my talk? Would anybody have listened this far? Will it ruin it?
I hope so. I don't think it'll do any harm.
There is in my kids' music room at school. How do I tell you that my children are very talented? I tell you that they play music, that they are musicians, which makes them geniuses. under the light switch, there was a little post-it note that somebody had written a note. And I took a picture of it and I've appropriated it and always give credit to the anonymous person who left the note. It is something I found online as well. It's not unique to this person. Yet it's not used nearly widely enough, and I think we should all... No, nobody else should use it, only I should use it. But it says, "Dear pessimists, optimists and realists." And you know where this is going, because I'm not an optimist, I'm a pessimist because nothing is going right in the world. And so many people in Britain today are just, nothing is going right, and that's fundamentally wrong. There's a huge amount of stuff that does go right on a regular basis that you choose to that is outweighed by your feelings about what is going wrong. So, dear pessimists, optimists, and realists, I'm not a pessimist or an optimist. I'm just a realist, So, therefore, I can bring my biases and beliefs and be a pessimist without calling myself a pessimist. So, dear pessimists, optimists, and realists, while you were arguing about the level of the glass, is it half full, is it half empty? I drank it. Regards, the opportunist.
Yes, I've heard that. I love that.
And it's that sense of you see the world as everybody else sees it, yet you choose to deal with the information flow, with the negativity in the world differently. You see that negativity, you go, there's a problem worth solving, and go off and solve the problem. And that is how huge and fundamental leaps forward are taken by humanity in sometimes the direst of circumstances, or the most dire circumstances.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I know you're busy. I know you've been traveling a lot. So I completely appreciate you taking your time and spending, an hour and a half with us, just sharing in buckets of wisdom. When I do another series, I'm going to call back on you. Hopefully you'll say yes, and you won't be like Charlie, too busy these days. Oh, sorry, I'm very busy these days. I hope you'll take but thank you so much. So anybody listening, honestly, check out Bruce, check out his books, check out his work. And also, of course, if you want to find out more about the Speaker Awards, go to thespeakerawards.com, have a read, join the list, or apply, depending when you're listening to this. But again, Bruce, there you go. He's showing off his little trophy. Bruce, thank you for being part of the winner series.
And do this, it becomes a bigger trophy. Look at that.
Yeah, it grows. It's magic. It's magic.
One final thought on this. If you're not in it, you can't win it. And I was blown away to be recognized in this. So thank you for organizing the awards. The judges, I applaud them for their great sense, and I hope when I enter next year, I'm not sure which category yet, that they maintain.
I'll enter the thought leadership one.
No, I can't. But yeah, look, I mean, it's that thing, and when you go into that environment and you put your best foot forward, you've got to be willing to lose. And if you lose, sometimes that can be the best thing that happens to you. It was for me.
Amazing, Bruce. Thank you. Let's let you go on with your day. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to releasing the next episode, so keep an eye out for the next one. Have a lovely day, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to this week's Front Row Podcast. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment. It's through your feedback that we grow. We hope you've taken lots of notes, benefited from the wisdom, and are now going to turn everything into action. Remember to keep an eye out for our next episode of the Front Row Podcast. And remember to like, subscribe, and of course leave us a 5-star review. We look forward to connecting with you and hearing the progress of your journey in the professional speaking world. Tune in next time for the Front Row Podcast.